the key lesson that being a personal trainer taught me about healthcare. Now, when I used to be a personal trainer way back in the day, this would have been 10, 11 years ago now, I had this one client and I trained with him 6 times a week. And I thought this was crazy at the time because it was $50 or $60 a session, which to me as a uni student was so much money back then. It was mental to think that someone would pay this much money for personal training. But it wasn't, in my opinion, great personal training either. Because a lot of mornings he was quite unfit. All he wanted to do was to walk on the treadmill or to go on the stationary bike. Because maybe he was a little bit sore from our previous sessions, or he had a lot on that day and he didn't want to exert himself too much at that stage and be sore all day long, which is understandable. But what I couldn't grasp at the time was the fact that he would just want me to stand next to him on the treadmill and talk to him for half an hour. And I remember one day I asked him and I said, how come you're paying me to, and this is fantastic because it helps me as a personal trainer, but how come you're paying me to just stand next to you while you walk on the treadmill rather than for me to see you once or twice a week, set you up with a great program, go through some interesting activities, and actually make this, in my opinion, a really worthwhile pursuit. And what he said to me was, it was really life-changing. It was basically, Peter, if I don't pay you to be here waiting for me, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to come. I'm going to sleep in and I'm not going to bother. And I've been told by my GP that if I don't improve my fitness and lose some weight and decrease my blood pressure and a few other things, that it could take decades off my life. And he's like, and that's really important to me, but it's not enough to actually get me in the gym. And that blew my mind because what he needed was he needed some accountability. And for him, the financial part of that was actually less important. In fact, if he was paying for it, he valued it more and then he would come. And it simply wasn't enough, the fact that he could lose years off his life from what his GP had told him to actually get him there. He needed that extra push, that extra accountability, someone to be waiting there, someone to be there supporting him, even though we weren't doing anything revolutionary by any means. Now, interestingly, we worked together for about 18 months. And over that 18 months, he lost about 20 kilos. He improved over time his diet, he made better diet choices, and he became more and more confident in the gym, in his own body, and we started to do more, I would say, fun exercises and more useful exercises for what he really wanted to be able to do. But in the 10 to 15 years leading up to that, he had constantly tried over and over again to get into the gym, to lose weight, to get into it. But he hadn't been successful. And what changed? The key thing that changed was accountability. And I've taken this into my physiotherapy career, into my healthcare career. And something that I feel that especially as young physiotherapists and young healthcare professionals, physio is my bias, I'll say physio and I mean healthcare professionals, is a lot of the time we actually don't value the accountability side of what we do enough. And because we don't value that accountability, we don't tend to help people with that side of it because we think, well, I don't want them to spend too much money and it's pretty basic, so we shouldn't have to be with them there doing that, and we can progress them faster and they can do more in their own time. And all of these things, I think, are valid points, but we have to remember that we're working with humans. And so it doesn't matter, and this is something that I would talk through with young therapists, it doesn't matter how good the program is that you write if someone doesn't do it. And so when we're looking at helping someone from a healthcare perspective, we have to, and this is the first key point here, we have to make sure that it fits in with their life and that they can and they will do it. That is absolutely key. So how can we always make sure that what we give people they can and they will do? Because I'd love to actually see a survey of really good information. I haven't been able to find anything that's on this, of when we give people exercise programs or home-based healthcare, how often it gets done and how often it gets done correctly. Because I'm sure, like me, if you work in musculoskeletal especially, or really anything, you give someone an exercise to do or you give someone something to do and they come back the next week and you say, all right, how have you gone with that? And they show you something completely different. They're like, yeah, it's been great. And then they show you and you're like, oh, that's not it at all. So first key is understanding how can we fit this into someone's life and make sure that they actually are going to do it and they can do it. The second part that I believe is really key within this, and especially when we're working with young therapists, is to see people more, not less, from an accountability perspective where it is appropriate. So what I mean by this is thinking about who is the human in front of me and what level of accountability do they need in order to be successful at getting past the challenge that they're facing. And sometimes it's asking them and listening in the history and finding out when they've had challenges like this before, how good are they at sticking to the rehab program? Because for some people, they may need to come in for more one-on-one sessions and they're going to get more value out of that. Physiotherapy is an example. Some people are just not very body aware, and so they'll get a lot of value out of that one-on-one nature. If we look at the next step, it could be, rather than seeing one-on-one, it could be in a group, so small group setting, but seeing people more frequently again, giving them accountability, structure, and support. And then the third one from that, depending on what the clinic offers, it could essentially be coming in and using the rehab-based gym, but them having 1, 2, 3 appointments per week where they actually come in and they do that if it's necessary and if it's viable for that person. Then from there, we can also look at, well, what's that next step? And that's that home-based rehab, but making sure that it is absolutely achievable. So when we're working with young healthcare professionals, ask them this one question. Where do you feel that accountability sits within your role? And get them to really go deep on this one. Because if you ask me when I was first a physiotherapist, and this was after I had that experience with the PT, I would have put it down very low. But at the end of the day, if people aren't implementing what we're giving them, and they're not getting better, and we're not giving them accountability to do so, then we aren't doing our job as healthcare professionals. And it'd be really interesting for the people you're working with, especially if you're getting frustrated at the lack of client results, maybe people dropping off cancels and DNAs, to actually understand where do they feel that accountability sits within their role. Because what I find is that the higher that goes up, the better the client outcomes. Now, I know some people may also be thinking, well, what about if a client can't afford to come in 2 or 3 times a week? Well, that's perfectly fine as well. What I've found is that if I ask someone to come in 3 times a week and they can't do that, they'll tell me, and then we'll adjust it based on their circumstances. However, if I ask someone to come in once a week, and in my heart of hearts, I truly believe that 3 times a week would have been the best, and I didn't even offer it to them, well, then I'm offering them my second or third best option to start with. And if I went to the GP and the GP gave me a medication and I used it and I came back and I wasn't better, and he said, well, maybe we'll give you the one up from that next time. I was thinking about giving it to you before, but you're a uni student and didn't think you had much money, so I gave you the cheaper option. I would be genuinely offended that someone had made a healthcare decision for me without giving me all of the options so that I can make an informed decision. And that's the key here. Part of our role is accountability, and part of our role is being able to explain things to our clients to help them to make informed decisions about their healthcare. So your key action, if you're watching this video and you're working with young healthcare professionals, is to ask them this question. Where do you feel that accountability sits within your role as a insert profession here? Physiotherapist, osteopath, speech pathologist, occupational therapist. Where do they feel that sits within that? And you can get a scale of 1 to 10 for the importance and get an understanding, because I would be willing to bet that the more senior the therapist you go, the more they've seen that accountability is really necessary to get fantastic long-term outcomes. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe to get more content like this. Also, if you have some suggestions of content around the healthcare field, healthcare business, mentoring young team members, whatever it may be, if you've got some ideas of things that you'd like us to create, let us know and we'll make those for you. I'll see you in the next video, my friends.